I'm Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick. Welcome to Gospel Tangents.
Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Critics of the Book of Mormon complain that it says that Jesus was born at Jerusalem rather than Bethlehem. How does Dr. Jeffrey Chadwick answer that charge? He's a New Testament scholar at BYU. We'll also talk about how the Book of Mormon helps us date the birth of Christ. Check out our conversation. So this brings up another point. Let's talk a little bit about the Book of Mormon, because it says Jesus was born at Jerusalem. How do you explain that?
Well, that's pretty easy, and I think that most commentators have noted that Bethlehem is just 5 miles south of ancient Jerusalem in terms of, a town and a town. Today, Bethlehem is to Jerusalem the way Orem is to Provo. If there weren't a political barrier there, because Israeli territory separates from Palestinian territory, you wouldn't know you were crossing from Jerusalem to Bethlehem today. They're literally that close, okay? But they were 5 miles separate anciently. But Bethlehem was easily described in ancient texts as being in the district or county of Jerusalem, or what Nephi himself calls the land of Jerusalem. Okay, in Alma 7:10, it does say Jesus was born at Jerusalem, the land of our forefathers. Okay, so it is referring to Jerusalem as a land instead of a city. In other words, someone is born in Salt Lake County, okay, whether he's in Salt Lake City or whether he's in,
Sandy or Harriman, or,
somewhere else. Well, if you're born in the land of Jerusalem, you're in the vicinity there. There are some ancient texts that do refer to, we think, to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem as being in the land of Jerusalem, including some Egyptian texts. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Some Egyptian texts say he was born in Jerusalem?
No, not that. They say that Bethlehem is a town in the district or land of Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. One of the El Amarna texts, which actually dates long before 600 BC, notes Bethlehem, a town in the land of Jerusalem.
Oh,
so it was not unusual in ancient times to refer to Bethlehem, if you had any reason to refer to it, as a town in the land of Jerusalem.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Alma 7:10 has never been one of those things that I've lost any sleep over. There are plenty of things you have to work to describe in Scripture, but that one is not a problem.
That's not a problem. All right. Because I know some critics think it's a problem.
Well, critics think the whole book's a problem, so that's their problem.
All right. Well, let's jump back here. So you've really been able to narrow down the month of December, and I know a lot of people I think probably rely on Talmage, but didn't Joseph Smith say something about April as well?
No, Joseph Smith made no statement on the timing of the birth of Christ. What Joseph Smith did was dictate the language of Doctrine and Covenants section 20. But Doctrine and Covenants section 20 verse 1, which says that the church was established on the 6th day of April, 1,830 years after the coming of the Lord in the flesh, okay, was to note within the calendaring system accepted at that time and still in ours, the date of the founding of the Latter-day Saint Church, not the date of Jesus' birth. In saying, and by the way, this is J. Reuben Clark in his book, Our Lord of the Gospels, which was another Latter-day Saint commentary on the life of Christ, which appeared 50 years after Brother Talmage's. Brother Clark took the position that Doctrine and Covenants section 20 verse 1 is not giving the imprimatur of accuracy to our current calendar. That what Doctrine and Covenants section 20 verse 1 is simply doing is saying the church was established on April 6th in the year we generally refer to as 1830, the year of our Lord. That's all, not more or less. In Elder Bruce R. McConkey's series called The Mortal Messiah, he actually asks, kind of in an endnote to one of his chapters, what was the year of Jesus' birth? And then, after saying this is a question about which the learned delight to debate, he goes ahead and debates it. And what he does is he states what Elder Talmage's position was in Jesus the Christ, where he used Doctrine and Covenants, section 20, verse 1, to suggest that Jesus was born on April 6th, 1830 years before the church was founded. But then he also points out what President J. Reuben Clark said, which was that gospel scholarship in general throughout Christianity, based on historical documents available, particularly about the life of Herod the Great and about Roman dating, would say that Herod died in 4 BC and Jesus' birth must be prior to that. And Brother Clark actually, in the dating scheme that he has in his book, puts Jesus' birth in December of 5 BC. The reason he did that is he said this is where the consensus of scholarship generally runs, and he said we don't see any reason to argue with it, and we'll use it because it's a model that's helpful to our discussion. He didn't take a position saying this is absolutely true, but this is where scholarship points to. Now, for a Latter-day Saint like myself, the question is that scholarship valid? Okay. So when I began to look at the question of what is the date of the birth of Christ, having great regard for Brother Talmage, I look at the information he brings forward. Having great regard for President Clark, I look at the sources that he looked at. Then I look at the sources that are available since both of them wrote. And all of the historical evidence would point to the fact that Jesus had to have been born at least 8 to 12 weeks before April 1st of 4 BC. Okay? And 12 weeks before that would put you right at the end of December.
So why 12 weeks? What is the significance?
You need about 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks, just for everything between the time that Jesus is born, which is mentioned in both Matthew 1, Matthew 2, and also Luke 2, between the time of his birth and the time that in Matthew 2 the family escapes to Egypt. Okay? And it's only after that point in Matthew 2 that it mentions that Herod dies. Okay? So after Jesus' birth, Luke tells us that 6 weeks pass. Actually, he doesn't say 6 weeks, but he says the days of her purification were accomplished, which for a woman who bore a male child was 40 days, till she could immerse in water and then go to the temple and present the child. So in Luke 2, when the child is presented at the temple, and the old prophet Simeon and the old prophetess Anna ooh and ah over him, Jesus is 6 weeks old at that point. And that's still happening while they're in the Holy Land, okay? Then the story moves on in Luke 2 to Jesus' childhood some years later. So after the appearance in the temple at age 6 weeks, you have to turn over to Matthew to find out what the next event is. And the next event is Matthew 2, the wise men show up.
Okay.
And pay their homage, and then the family escapes to Egypt. So the flight to Egypt has to have been, at the most compact time period, around 7 weeks after Jesus' birth. And if you allow for a little more leeway there, you can take it up to a few weeks more. But the most compact models will say that Herod the Great dies within a short time of the family, the Holy Family, going to Egypt. And so the most compact period there would be to allow somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks between the death of Herod the Great and the birth of Jesus that had occurred perhaps 3 months earlier.
So death of Herod was in April of 4
April
AD.
of 4 BC.
So you go back 12 weeks to December
of 5 BC.
5 BC for Jesus' birth.
Right. Now that's just using the minimum possible time in the New Testament accounts,
right, and
taking in the one historical aspect, which is that we know Herod the Great died in early April of 4 BC. The other issue, by the way, this is why in Christianity outside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there is still a significant debate about when, prior to January of 4 BC, Jesus was actually born. Okay? Because that's the minimum compact. Because Latter-day Saints have the Book of Mormon, that gives us another, documentary witness and other data that we can infuse into this discussion.
Yeah.
Because
let me back up here, 'cause I definitely want to go there, but I want to hit one thing, because I know that I've been taught in my Sunday school classes that some people have said that, hey, the wise men didn't come from the east for probably 2 years after Jesus' birth, and that's why Herod wanted to kill all the babies under 2. And so it sounded like to me you made the case that the wise men came within 6 weeks of Jesus'
right.
birth. So what's going on there?
Okay, it's good. If you don't mind,
Yeah.
since I'm doing this for free, okay, I'll make a plug here. I wrote a book on this whole subject.
Okay.
An entire book.
Plug away.
It's called Stone Manger,
Okay.
The Untold Story of the Birth of Jesus. And it's available at Amazon. You just go look up my name, Jeffrey R. Chadwick. It'll come right up, Stone Manger, The Untold Story of the Birth of Jesus. It's available. It's less than $3.
Really?
Yes,
Well, I'll be getting a
because I
copy right
didn't
away.
write it to make money.
Okay.
I wrote it so people could know the story. And you have to sell stuff on Amazon at a minimum, so that's
That's the ebook copy then.
the ebook, yeah.
The physical copy is probably more than that.
The physical copy doesn't exist.
Oh, it doesn't?
I only have it in ebook
Okay.
so that I can keep editorial control. Because a lot of times when you're working with a publishing house, and I had contracted with a couple of different ones to publish the book, but they wanted changes that I wasn't willing to make.
See, I always publish on Amazon On Demand, then you can still have control.
No, you can actually order it, in a hard copy, but everybody now does tablets, so why not?
Right.
This is the future. I work with a younger generation, and everybody's digital, so that makes it available to them. But everything we've discussed today is there. But almost everything we've discussed in terms of the if you want to look at this academically with a good deal of rigor, okay, everything that's been discussed is in these 2 volumes of the BYU Studies. This is volume 49-4 of BYU Studies, December 2010, in which the article dating the birth of Jesus Christ appears. And this is a related article in 54-4 from December of 2015, dating the death of Jesus Christ. And actually dating Jesus' entire life and knowing the point at which he died is also key to determining when he was born. Okay? There's an associated article called Dating the Departure of Lehi from Jerusalem, because for Latter-day Saints, that's also an issue. Because of what we call the 600-year prophecy in 1 Nephi, we expect that Jesus was born 600 years after Lehi departed. So can we work the departure date for Lehi into this discussion? And of course, as Latter-day Saints, we have to. So these are the dating trilogy from BYU Studies, and of course, you have to order them from BYU Studies, and they're a wonderful publication, but they will charge you just a little bit of money to get them. Not much. It's really a song for any of their good articles, but they're available at the BYU Studies website. And so there's a lot on this that you can read if our discussion today doesn't answer the questions, which it won't. But let me see if I can summarize what dating the death of Jesus Christ and also what the date of Lehi's departure has to do with fine-tuning how long before Herod's death we look at Jesus as having need to have been born. In terms of the question that you asked, which was about the wise men coming 2 years after, and now I've done it again. I need to put a marker in here, but I have to go to Matthew anyway, so I'd have to turn. So let me just turn here for a second. When we look in Matthew 2, what we do see, indeed, is that Herod sends, it doesn't say who he sent, by the way. It doesn't say that he sent soldiers. In my best understanding, this was what we would call a black ops situation, where Herod is actually sending out not Roman soldiers to kill all the children of a city. This would not have escaped being mentioned in Josephus' history, an outrage like that. But this was probably done more subtly, in which a number of children were killed. In a village like Bethlehem, there can't have been, in the period that Jesus was born, more than a few dozen baby boys. Okay, it just was too small of a place. So we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of children and soldiers killing them. Herod sent agents to kill, probably through different subterfuge ways, like staging raids and robberies on homes, etc., where the child would die, to kill the children that were within the window that he knew Jesus had been born in. Now it says here, of course, that in Matthew 2:16, he sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. What many people take that to mean is that he was killing the people 2 and under because he had inquired, and the wise men had told him, well, we saw the sign 2 years ago, okay? Mm-hmm. And we're just now getting here, right? So that when they don't report back to Herod saying, hey, we found where he lives, would you like to come see him? He hedges his bets and kills all the children of Bethlehem 2 years and under. I suspect that that's incorrect for 2 reasons. The first is that when we read Matthew 2, we see in verse 1, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there came wise men from the east, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east. Come to worship him. That particular phrase there suggests immediacy. Not that we saw his star in the east at the time he was born, and we waited 2 years to come and see him. No. This suggests that they had come rather immediately, having seen this miraculous sign. Okay? It's only a 6-week journey from Babylon, which would be presumably the east which is being spoken of, to Jerusalem. And so...
so Babylon, you're talking about modern-day Iraq?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I've actually heard a bunch of tales. I know that there's a tomb of the wise men in Iran. I've heard that they were...
Well, Iran would maybe be for another week, is all. Iran is next door, yeah.
I've also heard they came from India. Have you heard that?
I have. I don't think there's any evidence of that.
So,
First of all, they seem to be aware enough of what's going on in Jewish culture to know that a king of the Jews was expected, which suggests to me that these wise men are either people who knew Jews, which means they would be from the Babylon or Western Persia area, or maybe they even were Jews. Okay?
I've heard they were Zoroastrians.
Could be. I mean, Zoroastrianism, a form of it, was in vogue there. But since it doesn't say, it just simply says Magi, okay? And people try to make that into Persian, but it could be used to describe a holy man, even a mystic Jewish person. So I don't get hung up on the identity of the wise men. What I focus on is the fact that they had seen this sign and seemed to be coming immediately. And whether you want to come from Babylon at 6 weeks or Iran at 7 weeks, that's still under 2 months to get to Jerusalem.
Okay.
And then, after speaking with Herod, they go to Bethlehem. They do not report back. And Herod has the babies 2 years old and younger killed. So my feeling on this is one of 2 possibilities. Number one, either Herod is really hedging his bets, okay, and killing anybody that's within a broad range, okay, because I think that they're probably arriving something like 2 months or so after Jesus' birth, or the text has an error in it, and I do not rule out that the text originally might have meant to convey 2 months, but that by the time we get it in the form that we have it in the earliest manuscripts, it's been inflated to 2 years.
Oh.
So either way, okay, the beginning of Matthew 2 suggests to me that the wise men had come immediately after seeing the sign. And it would seem that the sign is, concurrent with the actual birth time of Christ, which means that they're there within a couple of months of Jesus' birth.
Okay.
So if you backdate that from, say, the end of March 4 BC, you're going to get the death of the birth of Jesus being at the latest somewhere in January. But if you fudge it a little bit better, you move it back into December. It gives you just a little more wiggle room for the wise men to have arrived some short time after the 40-day interval where Jesus had been taken to the temple.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Jeff Chadwick. In our next conversation, we'll talk about some apocryphal stories of Jesus' childhood with Dr. Thomas Wayment. And there's another story about a bunch of birds, or he made a bunch of mud birds or something.
Yeah, and gave life to them.
And then they flew away.
Yes. And it's like
he's really a brat. Jesus is a brat in this story.
I would agree. I would use that term. And what's so fascinating is it's like he has this divine power, but he's a teenager using it, which is really kind of fun, but you wonder what it says about your view of Jesus.
If you'd like to hear more about this conversation, please subscribe on our Patreon page at patreon.com/gospeltangents. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview uncut. Also, for our latest updates, go to our facebook.com/gospeltangents page, and you can get those updates as well. Also, we're on Twitter at gospeltangents, so you can see those updates. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Be sure to subscribe on our YouTube page at youtube.com/gospeltangents. And also, if you'd like to get a transcript of this, go to our Gospel Tangents interview page. Just go ahead and do a search for Gospel Tangents, and you should be able to find our page there. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there, and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.